Hello, and thanks for tuning in today. We are going to talk about making money today. We're talking about a really cool way to make money, especially when the economy changes like it is right now. It's going to open up a lot of opportunities in this sector. And I want to make sure you have the education and knowledge you need to be able to prosper and succeed. So with us today is Sean OToole. Now, after a successful technology career in Silicon Valley, Sean purchased and flipped over 150 residential and commercial properties. He exited the market in 2006, right before the credit bubble burst. We got to tap into his insight to figure out how he saw that one coming. Combining his technology and real estate experience, Sean launched ForeclosureRadar in 2007. Now, ForeclosureRadar was quickly recognized as the nation's best foreclosure information source, growing to help tens of thousands of real estate professionals prosper in an otherwise devastating market. And in 2013, Sean launched PropertyRadar, expanding beyond foreclosures to create a property data and owner information platform that powers thousands of real estate investors, real estate professionals, home service, and other property-centric businesses. Now, more than just a data company, PropertyRadar levels the playing field by giving small businesses the same opportunities found in public records that big businesses have long enjoyed. Sean, thanks for coming on the show with us today.
Oh, awesome. Thanks for having me.
So you are the guy in the space. You've been around through the mortgage crash. So let me ask you, good time to invest into real estate? And if so, or if not, why?
Yeah. I think the big picture answer is yes. Since really 2000, we've been in this, what I was calling a bubble cycle. And now I've had to rename a crisis cycle where, we had the dot-com crash, which I was a dot-com guy. And so I felt that one pretty personally. And then the housing crash and now coronavirus. And what we see after each of these is a lot of stimulus and lower rates. And when you've got a world where, the way to react to a crisis is lower interest rates, you're going to get inflated asset prices. So yeah, I want to own real estate.
Do you think, what do you had you were, well, let me start there. Going back, did you see the crisis coming in 2007? Did you see things that tipped you off, which is why you got out?
Yeah, there was a few things. I actually decided to exit the market in December of 2005, which may have been a little early, and spent the first half of 06 getting rid of my remaining properties, and then decided to launch ForeclosureRadar, which we launched in May of 2007, which when we first launched it, realtors rolled their eyes at us and they're like, there's no foreclosures. This is ridiculous. And I'm like, come here, type in your zip code. And they go, oh, that's got to be wrong. That can't be right, right? And I'm like, no, there's a lot of foreclosures coming. And that was still in 07. And most people weren't on board until the end of 08, right? September of 08 was when it was kind of unwild. So what did we see? I saw a few things. One is I saw sales slowing, right? So prices kept going up, but as they reached a point where, there weren't people who could still buy. And so sales started slowing, and prices don't correct downwards very quickly. You need a motivated seller, right? So the first thing you'll see is slower sales. That was one. The other thing that I saw, two other things that I saw that were more street level. One was I sold one of my flips, and it was a house that was probably 3 years earlier worth 250 grand. I was selling it for 450 grand. And a really cute young couple, but she was a maid and he was a field worker, and they were buying a $450,000 house. And I'm like, what don't I understand here? Do they get paid a lot more than I think, or what? And they qualified based on the option payment on a pay option arm, which I won't get into, but they weren't really truly qualified, but the lender was telling them they were qualified. And I said, oh, this is bad. And then the new home builders went from having a line out the door from new houses to giving away a free swimming pool. And I'm like, okay, the guy down the street who had no credit that bought a house, 6 months ago and didn't get the free pool, he's not going to keep making his payments when he finds out his next door neighbor got a free pool. And, and those kind of three things combined said, I don't want to own any more real estate right now.
So you got out and you hit right at the right time. What's happened with that since? Like, is it still as popular today as it was during that time with ForeclosureRadar?
Oh, yeah. So, well, ForeclosureRadar, became the dominant, our customers bought 40, $50 billion worth of foreclosures. And we became the number one. I ended up on 60 Minutes. So we were definitely right place, right time launching that when we did. And then, in 2010, it was clear to me the regulatory framework had changed. We'll never have that same crisis again. And we could talk more about that and why there will be foreclosures due to coronavirus, but it's not going to be the wave and the huge price declines we saw in 2008. There'll be some distress, there'll be some opportunity, don't get me wrong, but it's not going to be a repeat. And that's because the regulatory framework changed. And so when I saw that happen in like '09, by '10, I said, I've got to expand this business beyond foreclosures because foreclosures isn't going to be a large enough business in and of itself for what I'm trying to create. And so we expanded beyond foreclosures to all properties, kind of initially as a property information service, but the majority of our customers now use us to do targeted local marketing, hyper local marketing.
And I want to talk more about PropertyRadar because I'm looking at it. Your site's fantastic. I mean, it's a beautiful site, man. I got to definitely talk to you about who did this because it's really fantastic. So let's talk a little bit more about this because I've had people on that are in the distressed real estate space, and they say that the volume of people in trouble now could potentially dwarf, and they believe it is dwarfing what we saw in 2008. Obviously, completely different problem there. We won't get into it. I was in the mortgage industry too. So we understand, making the paper look better rated than what it was. And I think a lot of us understand the fundamentals of what happened there. And what you say makes sense with regulation, having a better control of that. But tell me more. I mean, because we're obviously in a whole other different kind of shift caused by a whole different type of event. Mortgages aren't on the front line like they were last time, but I think we both agree that there's a lot of people distressed right now. So what's it going to look like this time versus where it did last time?
So last time the regulatory framework, for a bank, for a lender, right, is that you have to get the bad asset off your book as fast as possible and at whatever price. And so what we saw was these foreclosures started to happen, right? They foreclosed in the minimum legal time frame because that's what regulators required, right? And then they put that house on the market and they dropped the price on that house until it sold, right? That was the way things worked before September 2008. Really, 2009 is when the full kind of regulatory effects started to take effect and get into place. And that led to this huge price decline. And then kind of in '09 and even '10, right, they realized that, wait a second, these houses as rentals, right, with a 7% return are worth 40, 50% more than we're selling them for. And this is when, new colony homes and all these folks started coming in and, the buy to rent thing started happening. And so I think there was enough learning there that the regulatory framework now says we're going to keep people in their homes for as long as possible, rather than we're going to get bad assets off the books as soon as possible. And, we're going to have foreclosures because you can't have a policy that says if you don't make your payments, don't worry, you get to stay in your house. Because as soon as word gets out about that, nobody makes their payments, right? So you're going to have some foreclosures, but it's basically to make examples of people to hopefully keep most people making their payment. The rest of the folks, an interesting thing happened in Nevada in the last crisis. The local state, all foreclosure is state law. And Nevada came in and basically said, we are going to hold the person who signs the foreclosure document, right, that gets submitted, criminally liable. Right. And so this is a $16 an hour employee at Bank of America whose job it is to take the forms off the computer, sign them, and submit them to the county. Right. And, that law kind of harkens back to the old days when your banker knew you. Right. And they knew what was going on and they had a personal understanding of your finances and stuff. And that's why they need to sign off on these things. But no banker knows you now. Right. Like, computer does. And so this idea that you're going to hold some $16 an hour employee at Bank of America criminally liable for signing the form is kind of nuts. And so the banks pretty much stopped foreclosing in Nevada. And I personally think you probably still have tens of thousands. We don't have good data on this. Nobody has good data on this, but tens of thousands of homeowners in Nevada who haven't made a payment since 2007.
Wow.
And I think we're going to see that again here.
It makes a lot of sense. And, I talk to people in the distressed mortgage space and like their logic of how they do business. It's like, why don't freaking banks do that? Because a lot of these guys that, the ethical stand-up guys, like they legitimately make an effort to keep those people in their home. Where, like you said, I mean, from what I've seen, the people I know, from banks to just like get them out of there. So I think it makes a lot of sense. It's almost like they were forced to adapt to that mentality of let's try to work with people and keep them there, because it's a lot more affordable to try that route than to get them out and then try to sell the property. And I mean, that could cost tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, or work with the homeowner and do a short sale, together. So I think short sales, we'll see those come back for sure for the agents out there in your audience. Look, there's a lot of people unemployed. There's a lot of people, struggling to pay rent, struggling to pay their mortgage, right? So there's a lot of distress. It's just, we're not going to see a foreclosure crisis because banking policy's changed. Regulations has changed.
So what do you think it will look like coming through COVID? Because I mean, I don't know. You tell me if you agree or disagree with that too in the answer, but do you agree that we're going to see a lot of people that are, breached that 4 months behind with everything that's happened with COVID? And if that is the case, then what does this look like in 2021 and beyond versus what we saw in 2008 and 9?
I think the other big thing that we're seeing, right, is after the dot-com crisis, right, there wasn't a huge amount of stimulus. It was mostly like, let's get the housing market going, right? And we'll kind of rescue ourselves from the dot-com crisis with the housing crisis. And then after the housing crisis, we saw more stimulus. And then with coronavirus, we saw even more stimulus. And I think what next year really looks like depends on how much more they throw at this, right? And, printing money and devaluing it, which is kind of what we've been doing so far, it gave us a pretty nice recovery so far, right? It doesn't feel as bad as it should. When you look at the number of businesses shut down, the number of people out of work, how much worse this economy should feel right now, the CARES Act, PPP, all the Fed monetary policy, all the rest really had an impact. And this feels a lot better right now than it should. And I don't know that most people realize it. And I don't think most people realize just how much of the kitchen sink they throw at it. And I expect we'll see more. We are seeing some bipartisan talks again about another maybe $1 billion of stimulus. It's less than the Democrats want, more than the Republicans want, but we're going to see more stimulus. And, with more stimulus, right, you're goosing the stock market, you're goosing real estate, and hopefully you get things going. Hopefully vaccine happens and we get back rolling, and I think there's a reasonable chance of that. But really the thing to watch there is stimulus, right? If we see no more stimulus, I think we're in trouble.
Yeah, it'll be interesting too, because we've got a presidential shift happening right now to see how that works out. Well, you deal with commercial, you deal with residential. So what do you think right now? Which is the better investment to get into right now?
So, Warren Buffett said, right, buy fear, sell greed, right? So, right now, it really depends on your market, right? So like San Francisco, there's some fear going on, right? It's very dense. Rents are down 25%, right? Like, so if you're in residential, I'd be looking for places where people are maybe too fearful, right? Where maybe that's creating some opportunity. Same thing in commercial, right? The lodging and travel, related businesses are getting pounded. Now, I think it's fair to say, some of that business travel is not going to come back. I think once we have a vaccine and stuff, I know I have huge personal pent-up demand to go like on vacation somewhere, right? So, if you're talking about a vacation property and it's beat up and distressed right now, and you've got some holding power and can buy it, like I like that a lot. Like, so office, I don't think will come back maybe in quite the same way, but I think that's a lot of good real estate and a lot of really good locations. I think that there's probably opportunity there. I'd buy where people are fearful.
Makes sense. What about getting started? And there's a lot of people here that might want to get started in real estate investing. What do you think is the best way for them to go out and get an education? Because man, there's a lot of different gurus in that space, a lot, and they all have completely different strategies that they preach. So where does somebody go to really get the best education to get started and grow in real estate investing?
You know, the very best way is to find a mentor. And, as you look at successful investors, right, after a while, they get successful. And, that early day stuff of like pounding on doors and doing the hard work is hard. And so as you become successful and as you have capital, right, you want to use other people to do that for you. And so the degree you can find those partners that can not only perhaps fund your deals, like if you want a wholesale or that kind of thing, but that can also provide you the guidance and help you. But you got to be willing to go knock your head against the wall. Door knocking works, right? Cold calling works. Like that's the way people get their early deals done. And if you don't have the stomach for that, in terms of really being a flipper, acquiring a lot of stuff, right? If you've got a lot of capital, there's different options for you. But if you're trying to get started and build something, finding a mentor and going and doing the hard work is the best way. I'd be really skeptical of gurus and classes. Pretty much anything you're going to find in a class, you can go find in a book at Barnes & Noble.
What about PropertyRadar? Why did you create PropertyRadar really? And what does it do? And who does it help? Because it seems like it helps agents, it helps investors. Give me some insight.
Yeah. So, I was a Silicon Valley 3-time startup guy in the 90s. And after the dot-com crash, I moved out to my vacation home and, it was on the water. I went wakeboarding, water skiing, but I made some good money in Silicon Valley, but not enough to like retire forever. And my buddy was a commercial real estate developer and making more money than most of my friends in Silicon Valley, but working less and having a lot more fun. And he said, "Hey, I've got a really good friend who buys and flips foreclosures. He does really well, but he's still running his business out of a cardboard box. Why don't you write software to help him run his business?" I said, "I'm not writing software for 40 guys. Like, I want to go solve big, huge problems, right?" He's like, "But go meet with him." And I did. And, I think we're all curious about buying foreclosures and the rest. So it was a super interesting meeting, but it was like, I kind of went in with like no plans to get involved. Just figured I'd hear the guy out. And I kept asking him, like, "What's your internal rate of return? Like, how, are you able to keep your money deployed and all the rest?" And so including the time his money was sitting in the bank, he actually didn't know this answer, but he gave me his files. And I went through and entered all of his files into a model that I built into Excel. He had an 80% return on capital. Wow. And I was like, wow. Yeah, wow. And I said, okay, if I look at the money I made in Silicon Valley, right, and the equity I have that I could tap, right, and I make an 80% return on that, right, I'm going to make more money doing this than I'm ever going to make in Silicon Valley, unless I happen to be employee one at Google or found, some really big software company. Like, I need to go do this. And so that's what I did. And I flipped 157, I think, properties until the end of 2005 when I decided to get out. I only managed a 55% return on capital. So I didn't do quite as well as my mentor. But I did take him on as a mentor and partnered with him. And, he provided, we put in equal capital on each deal. I did all the work and he provided all the kind of guidance. It was a great model to get started and really taught me the business. So at the end of 2005, right, like, I'm like, I don't want to own another piece of real estate. I'm worried as can be about this market. What am I going to do? Do I go back to Silicon Valley? Do I, what am I going to do? But I was already tracking every foreclosure in California and the numbers were starting to tick up. And I'm like, people need this information. People need this data, and the other services out here just aren't any good. And not only did we track the notices that get recorded at the county, but we tracked what happened at the auctions every day. And so I launched that service in 2007, went back to my software roots and built that out. And again, that that went crazy. Like literally we got 100% market share. We never expanded beyond the West Coast. And so Arizona, Nevada, Washington, Oregon, California. And then again, 2010 kind of said this is going to come to an end, moved into PropertyRadar, expanded that, worked on that for quite a few years, getting the product right. And we just went national last week. So now we're a nationwide property information and really marketing audience creation service, right? So, you know, one of the most amazing, incredible things, if you're in the home, you know, if you're in the mortgage business, if you're a realtor, you're a real estate investor, you sell home services of any kind, public records allow you to know every single potential customer in your market by name with a ton of information, how much equity they have, how long they've lived there, right? How much they paid for the house, right? Just, we have over 200 criteria that you can use to say, I think these folks, like we had the fires in California. There's over 1 million homes in California that still have a shake roof, right? A wood shake roof. If you're a roofer, why would you be spending any time other than marketing to those folks, especially if you're in a fire prone area? So that's what we do.
Wow. So anybody that's really marketing to home buyers or homeowners or homeowners,
yeah.
well, yeah, then this is fantastic because they can get, well, give me some other criteria. What other criteria in your guys' search that you can research through PropertyRadar?
So home value, equity. We do pull in some other things too, like age of owner, you know, presence of children, you know, education level, interests, things like that. But pretty much anything you can think of on real estate. So square footage, you know, construction type, roof type, all the equity, whether or not it's tagged as vacant, you know, owner occupied versus non-owner occupied, you know, owners that live out of state. So if you're a property manager, right, you want to focus not on people who, you know, have a rental but live down the street. You want to focus on the people that have a rental and live 2,000 miles away because they have to have a property manager, right? So yeah, about 200 criteria total on all the mortgage criteria. So what their interest rate is, how long they've had the mortgage, who their lender is, you know, whether it's an adjustable rate mortgage, what the term is on the mortgage. So all the mortgage data, the transfer data, how much money did they put down when they bought, you know, what kind of purchase was it? You can find flippers as well. So you can find all the flippers in your market. So you want to go find a mentor, right? Start by finding the flippers in your market and reaching out and talking to those guys, because those are the guys doing deals in your market. All these gurus, you know, they did stuff 5 years ago in Utah. They all seem to come from Utah or Florida, right? And, you know, but they've never done business in your market, right? So, you know, find out who is doing business in your market. Go meet those guys. Go follow their deals. See what they bought the property for. See what they sold it for. That's all in public record.
So do you guys do anything with LexisNexis?
Not directly, but it's, you know, it's a lot of similar data.
Yeah, I was wondering about that because
phone number, email address, all that stuff.
yeah, we deal with a lot of LexisNexis data on the business side, but I'm interested because LexisNexis is the only place I've ever seen that has like that. And you can't go get it like you can for everybody. You could just get your own, but man, it's got your housing details, what your house is made of. Like a lot of the stuff you're describing, you can get from LexisNexis. I never even knew that stuff was public until I saw LexisNexis come up. It's freaky, Sean. Like it's scary how much of this information is out there that people don't even know is out there. Like you said, the mortgage holder, the interest rates you got, the title company you closed. I think a lot of people watching right now are in shock that this information is public. So can you speak to that? Because I think it's intrusive and people have no idea how much of this information is out there and publicly accessible.
Yeah, same with foreclosure and all the rest. Yeah, so you know, I think there's definitely a really good question to have around, you know, privacy. And you know, we're constantly preaching to our customers, right? Because they're using this to target an audience of people. And nobody wants to feel targeted, right? So if, you know, you come in here and look for properties that are for foreclosure, and then you go knock on the person's door and you go, you're in foreclosure, right? You need to sell your house to me. Like, you're going to end up with a very angry person, right? But, you know, it's a double-edged sword, right? There's what people, like most people would say their birth date is private data, right? And that exact same person probably celebrated their 50th publicly on Facebook, right? On the day. And so is their birth date private, right? Like it's this, we have these really conflicting notions about what's private. And everybody, when they think about privacy, focuses on the data, right? What I want to see happen on privacy is like, I want to know that when I get a phone call, that whoever it is it says is calling me is actually that person, right? And that they can't call me from another phone number tomorrow, right? And if I don't want to take that phone call ever again, I can hit block and I will never see that number, that person again, right? Because I can block that person. Like privacy should be about, control over who can get access to. The problem with privacy over information is, so imagine your assessed value of your house wasn't public, right? Now your local tax assessor could start giving his buddies deals and charging them, less property taxes, basically stealing from you, right? And he could punish his enemies by making their property taxes artificially high. And we'd have no visibility of that. When you get a mortgage, that gets recorded, right? So that you can't go out and get another mortgage and cheat your mortgage company, right? They've got to be able to see that. That's what public records are there for. Public records are also very useful, though. You can look at that same data for those same reasons and also use it to help find your best customer.
Yeah, it's
and what
phenomenal.
we've done, and this has existed forever. Every big company does this. If you take out a home equity line of credit, Home Depot is going to start marketing to you because they know you're probably going to do some home improvement, right? But it's not been available to small businesses. It's, so LexisNexis and the CoreLogics and all these big companies are out there. This data's been available for years, Experian, all the rest, right? So what we've done though is we've made it accessible to small businesses. And but yeah, we will cooperate. If you misuse that data, we will cooperate with law enforcement. If you misuse that data, we're going to kick you off our platform immediately. Yeah. We track any complaints that come in to us and we follow those through and see who's, so yeah, no, it's a public records data in the US is a gift, but and it's incredibly powerful for small business, but yeah, you need to be respectful with it.
Yeah. Well, congratulations and great for you guys. I mean, I'm a huge advocate in the business space when it comes to lending, that there's all this data that is out there that these lenders and credit issuers that all these people have that you don't know they have, you don't even know exists. And kudos to you, because like you said, when we approached LexisNexis, they said, look, we want our information to be front facing, but nobody's doing it. It's all being used by back end sources. So just kudos, man, because you're tapping into all this data that's out there that people don't know and bringing it into a format where it's streamlined, it's organized, and it's done in a way that a lot of different kind of professionals can use this responsibly and make a real difference. Where can everybody go to learn more?
PropertyRadar.com. And, we're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, Twitter. I'm on all of those as well as Sean OToole, and happy to hear from anybody. And, we've been around now 14 years and just cranking away. And our investor customers have probably bought $50 billion worth of property now, flipped $50 billion worth of property. And, realtors used us pretty much list every short sale through the crisis on the West Coast, and lots of home services companies. We have solar companies and all kinds that, are growing their business. But we've been kind of just out in California, so a little bit secret to everybody else in the nation.
That's awesome. Any final thoughts that maybe things we haven't covered that you think everybody should know?
Wow.
It's an open
so
question.
Much. I mean, yeah, that's a big open question. Like a million places I could go with that. I think the big picture is like one of my favorite things is like there's a lot of change going on right now, right? It's a lot. It's like mentally we have a hard time keeping up with change, but I think we have to remind ourselves that all opportunity comes from change. Right? No opportunities come from the status quo. So when these change happen, good or bad or just change, right? you always want to be thinking about what opportunities does that create for me? What new things can I be doing, learning, changing my business about? And I think so many of us get stuck in what we're doing every day that when these big changes hit, like they hammer us down. But if we can turn that around in our head and go, okay, wait a second, there's an opportunity here. While my competitor is hammered down, I can make gains, right? And the rest, I just like everybody to think about this kind of period of time as nothing but opportunity.
Sean, thanks for coming on with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So everybody, a million things I can say here to wrap up. But if you look at Facebook and Google, two of by far the biggest companies in the world, they're very good at getting a lot of the data that you give them. And then they use that data for people to be able to target messages to you. What Sean has done is brilliant. It's freaking brilliant, because we try to do this same thing in the lending space. He's went out to all this publicly accessible information that, be honest, most people don't know. You probably watch this, have no clue that the interest rate you pay to the mortgage, the title company you close with, is even publicly accessible, but it is. The problem is, where do you go to get it, right? You don't even have a clue where to go to get it. Sean has brought all this data from 200 different data points and brought it into one beautiful application. Like, I've never even seen a website looking. It's gorgeous. And make it really easy for a lot of people to access. Real estate agents, real estate investors. I know you're out there watching. You're some of the biggest groups of people that we help, as well as, mortgage professionals, as well as anybody that's selling services to homeowners. Amongst many others, are able to go out and get all this information, pull it into one place, and then do a lot of things with it, but especially hyper target your actual customers, hyper target your market. And this is something brand new. If you get on this now, you have an advantage, because even though they've been around 14 plus years, this has mostly been in California. They're just kind of getting to a nationwide presence. So you have an advantage in 49 of the other states besides California to jump ahead of all of your competitors, because they didn't even know this thing existed. A lot of people in California might not even know. So make sure that you check out propertyradar.com. If for no other reason, the site is beautiful to check it out, but there's so much benefit to accessing this information and being able to use it to grow your business even faster. Whether you are a home and property service, whether you're a property investor, whether you're an agent, so many different applications. Make sure you check it out. And the site is propertyradar.com. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Make sure you visit propertyradar.com.